Oh, sure.
I heard you have a book coming.
I do. I'm pretty excited about it. It's called Reframing Assessment to Center Equity, Theories, Models, and Practice. So it's about centering equity and assessment work in higher education. And I've worked on that with my co-authors, which I really want to give a big shout out to Gavin Henning, Natasha Jankowski, Janina Baker, and Eric Montenegro. Traditionally, assessment and equity work have been really separated in higher ed. So the why of it is how we can think about assessment and data as a way to center equity, to advance equitable work in higher education, and mostly to work on systems change. We really think that assessment professionals have to be activists in this work. So the what is really setting context, particularly if folks are sort of new to this intersection of assessment and equity. So we define emerging terminology. We talk about narratives of equity in the evidence of student learning. We really have several authors talking about the history of equity-centered assessment. So it really comes out of the evaluation field and looking back at how assessment has been conducted. So thinking about different approaches like narrative storytelling. We tend to gravitate towards quantitative approaches, so there's a lot of different approaches and methods and ways, and then there's also the scholarship of assessment itself. So that's kind of a primer, if you will, for folks for whom this is new information. So the how is really a series of chapters authored by a wide variety of authors on multiple ways that this practices play themselves out. So there's not just one approach to centering equity. So we look at things like assessment in classroom, culturally relevant assessment, looking at equity gaps in higher ed and how we can close those, evaluation outside the classroom. We look at equitable access in STEM fields, the work at HBCUs, and also how technology can be an enabler for equity-centered assessment. So it's a rich exploration from a wide variety of voices about the different ways that equity-centered assessment can manifest itself. One of them that I worked on with my colleagues Stephanie Waterman, Janina Baker, and Gavin Henning is called Equity-Centered Assessment, Varying Approaches and Lenses. Stephanie Waterman actually writes a really beautiful piece in this chapter around Indigenous practices and Indigenous knowledge and assessment. And it really is an opening into thinking very differently than our sort of Western style that we have around assessment and knowledge systems in higher education. I really love the ending of the book. So we do talk more about technology, which seems like an interesting layer, but it's about the ways that technology can actually be an impediment or a harm, or it can actually help advance equity in assessment. So Peggy Mackey talks about that. My colleagues Danielle Achmapong and Marilee Bresciani-Ludwig and I have a chapter on developing individual awareness, the role of the assessor. So it really takes us into the field of mindfulness and activism as we think about assessment and equity. And I love the ending with Divya Beda and Natasha Jankowski and Peter Felton. They really talk about this as an invitation. So this is just an opening up, and we really don't know what's next. We really want to have inclusion and multiple voices exploring and using inquiry. And so there's an invitation at the end for people to share their practices and ideas in multiple ways about how they are centering equity in their assessment work.